Okay, we're going to be working on solving two-step equations. We've already done quite a bit of this, so I'm going to skip some of the easier ones. Y'all should be able to do problems like 2x plus 3 equals 12, or 6y minus 5 equals 11. Remember, the steps to solving two-step equations is always circle all your variables, draw the line down the center, and then you start your two-step equation, adding or subtracting anything that's not in the circle, and then dividing by everything except for the variable to make it a single positive variable. So I'm going to start with one that's a little more difficult because it involves a fraction. So 1/8d plus 7 equals 16 on number 3 is what we're going to start with. I'm going to do the same steps. I circle my variable and everything and the sign that's in front of it, if there is one. I draw my line to divide the two halves of my equation, and I'm going to do the opposite of what's on the outside of the equation. So since it's a positive 7 and I want to make it a 0, I have to subtract 7 from it. And I'll do that to both sides. That leaves me negative 1/8d equals 11. Now, I'm sorry, equals 9. I don't know where I was going with that. Now, in order to solve with a fraction, I have to understand that normally, because this is a multiplication, I would divide by negative 1/8, but there's an easier way to do it, because looking at the division of 1/8 divided by negative 1/8 gets kind of ugly. So we do division a bit differently, and we write it like this. The proper way to do a division of a fraction is we're supposed to change the division to multiplication and multiply by the reciprocal of the fraction. In other words, we're going to keep, change, flip. I can do that in the solving process by just multiplying instead of dividing by the reciprocal of 1/8, which is 8/1. And because it's a negative, I also want to take care of the negative sign by multiplying by the negative of 8/1. So over here I'll also multiply by negative 8/1, and so my answer is negative 72. We always, when we see a fraction as part of a problem, we're going to have to multiply by the reciprocal at the end. If it's a negative fraction, I'll multiply by the negative reciprocal. If it's a positive fraction, I'll multiply by the positive reciprocal. So let's look at another one in this column. Here I have 3/4 x minus 2 equals 8. I'm going to circle, do the opposite, the reciprocal of 3/4 is 4/3, and it's positive, so I'll make it positive. Notice how I write it. I write the 4 next to the 10 and the denominator, the 3, under the 4, because literally I'm doing 10 times 4 divided by 3. So I end up with 40/3. 3 will go into it 13 times with 1/3 left over. That would be your answer. So I add 2 to get rid of the 2, and then I multiply by the reciprocal of 3/4, which is 4/3, or I flip the 3/4. Now, what if I have something like this? I know that we've done them before, but I want to make sure that you still understand it. Process is the same. First step is I'm going to subtract the 8, and I get negative 10. So x divided by 18 is negative 10. Because this is a division problem, the way that you change this into a single x, instead of x divided by 18, we're going to do multiply by 18. We do the opposite. Because it's positive, I'll multiply by positive. So x equals negative 180. On the word problems, don't get overwhelmed by it. Just read what it says. Last week, Kiwi filled up his car with his 16-gallon tank with gas. So he has 16 gallons right now. On average, his car burns 0.03 gallons of gas per mile. That means every gallon takes away 0.03 gallons. Every mile takes away 0.03 gallons. Since I don't know the number of miles he drives, I'm going to put an X. If Kiwi has 4 gallons left, how many miles has he driven? So X is the miles. If I'm so I'm trying to figure out how many miles would end up with 4 gallons left. Process is the same. I circle the number and the sign in front of it. Because that's a positive 16, I need to subtract. So negative 0.03x equals negative 12. Now I will just divide by negative 0.03 to get the number of gallons the number of miles that he's driven. Don't freak out when this happens, but whenever you divide by a fraction or divide by a decimal, this number is actually going to get much bigger, particularly when it's dividing by a fraction like negative 0.03. Well, because it's negative, it's going to become a positive. And when I divide 12 by 0.03, it ends up being 400. Do not freak out when you see that happen. We have 2 decimal places, so it's going to move 2 decimal places. It's going to have the 100 in there instead of just a 12. So 400 would be the answer for this one. And that answer choice is right there. When you are done, you will have a line of letters across here. You will rearrange the letters to answer the question, why did the SNORGS name their only daughter Margarine? Let's keep working on the next page. So we'll turn to the back. Okay, back here we have just more problems exactly like we did on front. The ones I'm going to draw your attention to on this page, I'm not going to work with these fractions anymore. If you need help with the fractions, go back and look at the other paper that we just did. So I'm going to work more on when there are multiple x's and when the variable is part of an expression as a denominator or a numerator. So we'll look at what happens there. So let's go to one that has multiple x's, like number 7. Process, still the same. Divide, and I circle my x. Now notice I have 2 x's. That's too many circles. So I need to figure out how many x's I really have on this side. I have 7 x's here, and I subtract 4 x's. So that leaves me with 3 x's minus 11. And I bring down my 6 because there's nothing on this side to do. Now I start my process all over by circling x's. Now I finally just have the 1 x, so I'll add 11. So 3x equals 17. That means I divide by 3. 3 will go into 17 5 times with 2/3 left over. So that should be my answer for number 7. And you see right here, 5 2/3 is HIS. So I'll go up here to 7 and I'll put HIS. And this is going to be the rest of this question and the answer. Okay. Same problem over here. Draw my line, circle my y's. I have 2 circles. That means that I have to figure out how many total I have. If I have a positive y here and 13 negatives, then I have negative 8 minus 12 y's. And I can start my, whoops, I wrote that backwards. I can start my whole process over again. Draw my line, circle my y's, and I can finish it from there. Let's look at one that looks really daunting. Down here I have negative 15p plus 9/5 p. I'm going to circle those. I have 2 circles, so I'm going to add them together. I have to subtract 1/5 from 9/5, so I end up with 8/5 p plus 6 equaling 30. Start my process over. Subtract 6, subtract 6. 24 equals 8/5 p. Now I multiply by the reciprocal. 5/8, 5/8. So this will be 120 divided by 8. I can either reduce this. If I reduce it, I can reduce them. First, I can reduce them by 4. If we want to make it easy, I can reduce it by 2 and get 64. I can reduce it by 2 again and get 30 halves, and 30 halves will reduce to 15. Let me see. Should it have been a negative? No. So it should be a positive 15. So 12 should be said. So I'm recording that up there. So finally, let's look at ones that look like this, where I have a whole expression as part of a numerator. We're going to treat this just like it's in parentheses. So what I'm doing is I'm taking this expression and dividing it by 2. I don't like that I'm dividing by 2. So because normally we do PEMDAS parentheses first, when we're doing it backwards, I need to do parentheses last. There's nothing to add or subtract that isn't in parentheses, so I keep going down the line. Next I'll check to see if there's a multiplication or division. Yes, I have a division right here. So to get rid of divided 2, I multiply by 2. So 4m minus 7 equals 36. Start my process over. Add 7, 4m equals 43. Divide by 4, and I end up with 10 3/4. All right, so that's how we go through this, trying to find places where, like on number 5, you'll see that I have that same thing, so I'm going to have to multiply by 6 first and solve. Number 11, I'll have to do the same thing. This d plus 8 will be the last thing I'll worry about. I need to get rid of this divided 3 first, so I'll multiply by 3 to get that out of there. So that's what you're going to have to do on this side. If we're looking at word problems, again, just take it piece by piece. So far, 37 miles of a new highway have been completed. This is 1 mile less than 2/3 of the entire length. So 37 is 1 mile less than 2/3 of the length. So if the length is going to be 2/3 of x, whatever the total length is, and this is 1 mile less than 2/3 of the total length, would be 37. So now I can finish working that problem. Buck rented a truck for $39.95 plus 32 cents per mile. I'm just going to write that right down here without even thinking about it. Plus 0.32 per mile. Before returning the truck, he filled the tank with gasoline, which cost $9.80. If the total was 70.23, how far was the truck driven? So, if the total was 70.23, we can figure out the number of miles. Once I know the number of miles, I can figure out the gallons, and with the gallons I can figure out the cost. Oh, I'm sorry. So if he added 980 to it, so it should be 39.95 plus 0.32x plus the amount he spent on gas would equal 70.23. So in this case, I circle my x, but I've got two things inside here. So I'll have to subtract 39.95 and subtract 980 from the 723. And then I'll divide by 32x, And that would end up giving you how many miles he drove. So work that out, work this out. You might have to use another piece of paper for this page because as you can see, it starts to bleed into other problems and gets a little bit messy. So work them on another page.